There is a new report, as we said in the open. In 2015, the United States government was warned about the Wuhan lab, specifically by the French government. And it was the French intelligence officials who went to the U.S. government, and they were working on building this lab. By the way, at the time this happened, the French military wasn't comfortable with it, and the French intel community was not comfortable with it. But the politicians moved forward. They're the people directly elected by the people, so you deal with those consequences. The U.S. government, though, gets the warning. And they got the warning from the French because they said they're cutting back our collaboration. 2 years later, and this is when the whole new wings of this lab that the French government had collaborated with the Chinese government to build open. So in 2017, 2 years later, they got totally kicked out. And this was the warning they gave to the State Department, that they had grave concerns as to Chinese motivations. And then, of course, in 2021, we saw in the State Department report that the Wuhan lab was engaged in classified research on behalf of the Chinese military, starting in when? The same time the French were completely kicked out of their collaboration in 2017.
It was very clear to us when the virus became transmissible, lethal, and had escaped into the world that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was at the base of it all. And while we couldn't prove it because, as you described, doctors being disappeared, journalists being taken off the map, we knew the history of the French-built lab. We knew the history that they'd been kicked out. We knew that there had been resources placed there in an attempt to try and make the lab more secure. But we knew that those had all ended in a bad way. And we had a laboratory that was unsafe for practicing unsafe gain-of-function research.
After the pandemic happened, they realized that the lab was the most likely source of the leak. And you heard Secretary Pompeo talk about whether that was the source of the leak or not. We know that the Chinese implemented a domestic travel ban without implementing an international travel ban. So all of that together, Jordan, it's ironclad, conclusive proof that China is responsible for this outbreak and needs to be held accountable.
At the end of the Trump administration, the State Department revealed that they were indeed doing classified military research at this lab. And as you indicated, in 2018, when there was a State Department cable that warned that there were not highly trained technicians working at Wuhan, what happened? The Chinese not only denied it, they permanently banned the U.S. officials who sent that message from the lab itself.
If there's no actual consequences, and it's just, the U.S. government condemning with words, do the Chinese back down at all?
There have to be real costs imposed. It's not about mouthing the right words. They're going to finish this so-called investigation in 30 days or so. No matter what it says, we know enough already. We can seize assets. We can file lawsuits. There are a myriad of tools. We can sanction senior leaders. We can build out a coalition around the world who says we're not going to conduct operations in and around Wuhan, the place from which this virus came. The tools are readily available. We don't need any new laws. We don't need anything other than an administration that is prepared to impose enormous cost on China, the same way they imposed enormous costs on the United States of America.
China is not our friend. They cannot be trusted. And this Wuhan issue, we will never know, I think, the whole truth of what's going on there. But we do know that the parties pulling the strings are the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military, and that they are intimately involved in this, which is part of the reason they will not let researchers go in. They will not reveal, let the world see the records.
They're not such a behemoth that they can't be impacted by the world. World coming together could impose a serious punishment that would impact the Chinese Communist Party. But instead, it's a lot of, we see the tough talk, we see the condemnation, but we don't see the action.